Welcome to Trending Unpacked, the show that dives into what the world's been searching for and why it matters. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something that's been popping up more and more in our feeds and conversations, something that's quietly yet significantly altering our relationship with the natural world: Lyme disease. It's a topic that appears to be trending with increasing urgency in 2025. And to really unpack what's going on, we've gathered your sources from global Google Trends data to in-depth public health reports and, well, the unfiltered discussions lighting up social media. Our mission today is to cut through the noise and extract the most vital nuggets of knowledge from all this material. We'll be exploring the specific forces driving Lyme disease's increased prominence, what this bacterial infection truly entails for the human body, its profound and often surprising connections to climate change, why diagnosing it remains such a challenging maze for patients and doctors alike, and how its complexities are being amplified and, debated in the vast online sphere. So let's begin to unravel this complex health trend.
It's truly a compelling area of study right now because it doesn't exist in a vacuum. What we're seeing with Lyme disease is a fascinating confluence of environmental shifts, evolving public health challenges, and even fundamental changes in how we, as a society, communicate about health and illness online. It's really a multi-layered phenomenon, and understanding it requires looking beyond simple headlines to see how these converging factors are making Lyme a topic of escalating concern and conversation globally. Hashtag IPAI, why Lyme disease is trending in 2025.
Okay, so let's start with the why now. Our sources consistently point to a remarkable surge in online searches related to Lyme disease. Google Trends, especially, it paints a vivid picture, showing not just an increase, but sharp, almost, parabolic spikes in search queries for phrases like tick bites, Lyme symptoms, bullseye rash, and Lyme disease treatment. This isn't just a slight uptick from previous years, is it? It feels like a substantial leap in public attention, particularly during the warmer months in the Northern Hemisphere.
That's right. It's as if a collective awareness, or maybe even direct personal encounters, have hit some kind of tipping point. This escalating search behavior is highly indicative. It suggests a growing public awareness and, maybe more critically, a heightened level of genuine concern that really goes beyond the typical seasonal ups and downs. When people are actively seeking information on this scale, it's usually a pretty strong signal. It can mean that either they, a family member, or someone they know might be experiencing symptoms, or they're simply becoming much more aware of the escalating risk in their local environment. The sheer magnitude of this proactive search behavior year over year, it points to a real-world shift in perception and experience. It hints at something more significant than just, passing curiosity.
It certainly feels like it's permeated everyday conversations more. You mentioned the magnitude of the increase. When we look at Google Trends, is this happening everywhere, or are there specific geographical hotspots where this digital pulse is particularly intense?
That's a great question. The search interest and indeed the rising concern, it's particularly pronounced across the U.S., Canada, and specific parts of Europe. And these regions, they correlate almost precisely with areas where deer tick populations are not only prevalent, but are also, demonstrably increasing their geographical range or density.
Ah, okay.
Now, the seasonal pattern is expected. Summer is definitely peak tick season, right? It aligns with more outdoor activity and thus more human tick encounters. But it's the intensity and the sustained higher baseline of searches, even outside of those traditional peak seasons, that's truly striking this year.
Right.
It suggests that the underlying conditions promoting tick presence and disease transmission are expanding beyond historical norms, driving a more pervasive, maybe even year-round vigilance among the public.
And beyond just the raw data of searches, our sources consistently highlight something else driving this awareness to the influence of high-profile public figures. We're talking about names like Justin Bieber, who's been incredibly open about his journey, Shania Twain, Bella Hadid, all people who've openly shared their Lyme diagnoses and often the long, difficult path to getting them.
Yes, that's a huge factor.
Their personal stories, shared across massive platforms, have effectively brought what might otherwise stay a niche medical discussion right into millions of living rooms and social feeds. It's almost like an unintentional but really powerful public health campaign.
It absolutely raises a profound point about the unique role public figures play in shaping public health narratives. When celebrities, with their huge reach and relatability, choose to share these intensely personal health struggles, it does something that traditional public health campaigns often struggle with.
It makes it real.
Exactly. It humanizes the condition. It transforms a complex medical term, like Borrelia burgdorferi, into a relatable human experience. And this undeniably boosts awareness, shifting a condition from the periphery right into the mainstream conversation. People see someone they admire, someone they feel connected to, struggling, and it often sparks that immediate question in their own minds. Could this affect me? What is this disease really about?
Hmm.
It fosters a sense of empathy and urgency that, official advisories, however well-intended, might not always evoke in the same way.
It truly has a ripple effect, doesn't it? One person shares their experience, their vulnerability, and suddenly millions more are not only aware, but are often compelled to learn more. It creates a space for broader understanding, maybe helps people connect their own vague symptoms to a possible diagnosis.
Definitely. This kind of organic, personal storytelling coming from trusted voices can be a far more potent catalyst for individual action, whether that's looking into personal symptoms, seeking medical advice, or just being more cautious outdoors than any formal announcement.
It brings the abstract right into immediate personal relevance.
Okay, and this leads us to what many of our sources identify as maybe the core reason for the observed increase: a genuine, measurable rise in reported Lyme disease cases. This isn't just about more awareness, right? It's about a tangible epidemiological shift.
Precisely.
Organizations like the CDC, for instance, they're reporting consistent year-over-year increases in documented cases, not just in traditional Lyme areas like New England, but also significantly in places like the Great Lakes region and the Pacific Northwest, where maybe it wasn't as common before.
That's the critical distinction. Public awareness is one piece, absolutely.
Yeah.
But actual verifiable growth in disease incidence points to deeper systemic changes. You've hit on the crucial point. This isn't simply about people looking for information more. It's about more people getting the disease.
Right.
And this increase in reported cases is fundamentally tied to significant environmental changes, particularly those driven by a warming climate. Milder winters, for example, are proving to be a major factor in, well, the proliferation of tick populations.
Well, when winters are shorter, less consistently cold, and less severe, a greater number of ticks, specifically the black-legged or deer tick, Ixodes scapularis, survive to reproduce.
Okay.
This extended survival rate directly translates to a larger, more robust population of ticks emerging in the spring. It's a fundamental shift in the ecological conditions that favor these disease vectors, giving them a significant advantage in their life cycle.
So to distill this for someone planning their outdoor activities like hiking or gardening, it means more ticks are not only surviving, but are also active for longer periods within the year.
Exactly. It extends the window of opportunity for transmission quite significantly.
So your risk exposure period has effectively lengthened considerably.
That's right. And our sources also suggest that behavioral shifts, maybe people spending more time outdoors post-COVID, could further amplify this risk equation by simply increasing human-tick interactions. It really is a confluence of factors: environmental changes favoring ticks, potential behavioral shifts increasing exposure, and definitely heightened public awareness, making people more likely to seek diagnosis, all converging to make Lyme disease an increasingly pressing health topic in 2025. Hashtag to two. What exactly is Lyme disease?
Okay, so we've established why Lyme disease is very much trending, from the digital buzz and celebrity influence to these undeniable environmental shifts. But let's take a step back for a second and lay the foundational understanding. For those who might have heard the name but aren't entirely sure what it actually involves, what exactly is Lyme disease at its biological core?
Right, the fundamentals. At its core, Lyme disease is a bacterial infection. It's caused by a specific type of bacterium known as Borrelia burgdorferi.
Okay, bacteria, not a virus.
Correct. Not a virus like the flu or measles, not a fungus either. It's a living organism, a unique spiral-shaped bacterium, often called a spirochete. And this shape, it actually allows it to sort of corkscrew and burrow deep into tissues, which can make it particularly challenging for the body's immune system to completely clear.
Stealthy.
A bit, yeah.
Right,
Its structure allows it to persist and spread throughout the body. And critically, it's primarily transmitted to humans through the bite of infected deer ticks.
Often called black-legged ticks.
That's right, same thing. These tiny arachnids, which can be as small as a poppy seed in their nymph stage, the stage most likely to transmit the disease. They're the main vectors.
How do they get infected?
They acquire the bacteria by feeding on infected small mammals, like mice or chipmunks, which act as reservoirs for the bacteria. Then they can transmit it to humans when they bite and feed again. And it's really vital to understand that Lyme disease is not transmitted person to person. You can't catch it from someone else, like a cold. Nor can it be spread by other common insects, like mosquitoes or flies. Its transmission is specifically and uniquely tied to the bite of an infected deer tick.
Okay, so it's a specific bacterium, Borrelia burgdorferi, spread by a specific kind of tick, the deer tick, and its unique spiral shape helps it evade our defenses. That clarifies a lot. But once this bacterium gets into your system through a bite, what does it actually do to your body? What are the typical things someone might experience?
Well, the symptoms in the early stages, which usually show up anywhere from 3 to 30 days after an affected tick bite, they could be quite general, often easily mistaken for other common illnesses.
Like what?
Usually nonspecific flu-like symptoms. Think fatigue, maybe a low-grade fever, headaches, and generalized muscle and joint aches. Just feeling kind of run down and achy.
Okay, so pretty vague initially.
Very vague. However, the most well-known and often the most crucial early indicator, though it's important to stress it's not always present, is the bullseye rash.
Ah, yes, erythema migrans.
Exactly, erythema migrans. This distinctive rash typically starts as a small red bump at the bite site and then expands over several days. It often appears as a red ring with a clear center, really resembling a target.
Does it hurt or itch?
Usually not. It can be warm to the touch, but typically isn't itchy or painful. Spotting this rash can be absolutely key for early diagnosis, but its appearance can vary. Sometimes it's just uniformly red or maybe appears as a solid patch, not a clear ring. And it can pop up in less obvious places too, like the scalp or behind the knee, where it's easily missed.
So if you've been in an area with ticks, maybe you don't even remember getting bitten because they're so tiny.
Right, then those ticks are incredibly small.
But then you develop a flu-like illness, or maybe you spot that distinctive expanding rash that's typically the acute phase. That's when the infection is just starting to take hold.
Precisely. That early recognition and getting prompt treatment, usually with a short course of antibiotics like doxycycline, are absolutely critical for a successful outcome, preventing later complications. However, what's profoundly challenging and a really significant part of the current public health conversation is that the disease can progress if it's not treated promptly, or even, in the subset of cases, despite what's considered adequate initial treatment.
Ah, this is where it gets complicated.
Very. In these chronic or later stage manifestations, the symptoms can become incredibly debilitating and protracted. Sometimes they strikingly resemble what people describe as long COVID-like symptoms.
Really? Like what kind of symptoms?
This is where the disease can truly take a huge toll on patients' lives. We're talking about profound, persistent fatigue that doesn't get better with rest, significant brain fog that impairs concentration, memory, and just thinking clearly.
Wow.
Ongoing joint and muscle pain that can actually migrate around the body, and even neurological issues like nerve pain, numbness, tingling, or even Bell's palsy facial paralysis.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It is, and this broad, often vague constellation of symptoms makes it incredibly difficult to distinguish from other chronic conditions like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, even autoimmune diseases. It creates a real diagnostic puzzle for doctors and, understandably, immense, often isolating frustration for those suffering.
That must be profoundly isolating, especially when your symptoms aren't easily pinned down with clear tests or a universally accepted diagnosis. Living with those kinds of chronic, debilitating, invisible symptoms, that sounds like an incredibly challenging path.
It absolutely is, and it leads us directly into the connection with our changing environment. Hashtag #3, the unpacking of the climate change connection. Hashtag expanding tick habitats.
We've already touched on the climate change connection being a big factor in Lyme's rise, but our sources really emphasize it as perhaps the primary driver for the increase in cases we're seeing. This isn't just theoretical, right? It's a verifiable, on-the-ground reality. How exactly are warming temperatures expanding tick habitats and bringing the disease to new areas?
Yeah, this is where we see the direct ecological consequences of climate change really manifesting as a public health crisis. It's quite stark. Essentially, warming temperatures mean that regions previously too cold for ticks to survive the winter or complete their life cycle are now becoming increasingly hospitable.
So areas that used to be safe are not anymore.
Pretty much. Ticks, particularly the deer tick, need specific temperature ranges and enough humidity to complete their multi-stage life cycle from egg to larva, nymph, and adult, and to successfully find hosts, feed, and reproduce. Historically, colder, harsher winters and shorter summers in many northern areas or higher altitudes acted as natural geographic barriers. They limited tick population growth and their northward expansion.
Okay.
As average global temperatures rise, these ideal conditions, the right temperature, the right humidity, are extending further north, up into higher altitudes, and generally into new geographic zones. It's basically rolling out a much larger welcome mat for tick populations.
It fundamentally shifts the ecological balance in their favor.
Precisely. It allows them to establish themselves and thrive where they simply couldn't survive before.
So areas that historically had little to no tick problem or where the risk was considered, negligible, are now seeing established reproducing tick populations. This isn't just an inconvenience. It fundamentally redraws the disease risk map for people who live there, work outdoors, or even just visit these newly affected regions for recreation.
Absolutely. I mean, vigilance,
Yeah.
like doing tick checks and using repellents,
Yeah.
is becoming necessary in places where it was virtually unheard of just a decade or two ago. It changes the game. Hashtag B, shorter winters, longer seasons. And intrinsically tied to that habitat expansion is the profound impact of shorter, milder winters on the tick's life cycle and its overall activity levels.
Right. You mentioned ticks surviving winter better.
Yes, and it's not just survival. While ticks aren't entirely dormant in winter, they can actually become active on warmer days, even in January or February if it thaws. Yeah, but their activity levels are significantly reduced during prolonged freezing temperatures. That traditionally kept their numbers somewhat in check and confined their activity to warmer months. Shorter, less severe winters mean they emerge from their overwintering states earlier in the spring, maybe March instead of April or May, and they remain active later into the fall, maybe November or even December, instead of October.
So it effectively lengthens the entire tick season.
Exactly. Instead of a relatively short window of maybe a few months of high risk, say June through August, we're seeing potentially 6, 7, or even 8 months where ticks are actively out there seeking hosts.
That makes perfect ecological sense. A significantly longer active season means exponentially more opportunities for ticks to find hosts, deer, mice, birds, us, and critically, more opportunities to transmit the Borrelia bacteria if they're infected. It directly increases the exposure window for individuals.
Dramatically. If ticks are out and about for a greater portion of the year, then your chances of encountering one, getting bitten, and potentially acquiring an infection just mathematically increase.
So this means you, as a listener, might need to be vigilant about tick bites for many more months out of the year than you did maybe 10, 15 years ago. It really reshapes our whole seasonal understanding of outdoor safety and risk. Hashtag geographical impacts.
And this then brings us to a crucial point about where these specific climate-driven impacts are being felt most acutely. Our sources specifically highlight regions like the northern U.S. states. Think the expansive areas of New England, the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes region. These are classic examples.
This is where Lyme has been known but is intensifying or spreading.
Exactly. But also, we're seeing impacts in various parts of Canada, which is seeing significant northward expansion, parts of Europe experiencing similar trends, and even, interestingly, some reports mention changing dynamics in parts of Australia, though the specific tick species and diseases might differ there. But the common thread is that these are all geographic areas experiencing significant, measurable shifts in their climate patterns, rising average temperatures, milder winters, altered rainfall. The observed, documented increases in tick populations and subsequently tick-borne illnesses like Lyme in these specific regions directly correlate with these climate changes. It's a stark, tangible, real-world consequence of a warming planet.
Yeah.
This isn't just abstract climate modeling. It's observed disease incidents on the ground, impacting real communities and real people right now.
It's increasingly clear that climate change is far from just an abstract concept we talk about. It's a tangible, on-the-ground phenomenon that is directly impacting our health and dramatically increasing the prevalence of diseases like Lyme. It's a profound real-world consequence that people need to be acutely aware of when they're heading outdoors, whether for a hike, gardening, or just playing in the park. The maps of where diseases thrive are literally being redrawn by our changing climate.
And Lyme disease stands as one of the clearest, most urgent examples of that redraw happening before our eyes. #5E. The diagnostic maze in medical debates.
Okay, so despite Lyme disease's growing prevalence and all this increased public awareness we've talked about, our sources consistently indicate that actually diagnosing it still remains notoriously difficult, a complex maze for both patients and doctors. Why is misdiagnosis or late diagnosis so incredibly common? It seems counterintuitive given how much we're talking about it.
It really does, but the challenge of diagnosing Lyme is truly multifaceted. It creates a kind of a perfect storm for diagnostic delays and errors. Firstly, as we touched on, the early symptoms, fatigue, fever, headaches, general aches, they are incredibly nonspecific.
Right, could be anything.
Exactly. They can easily mimic a vast array of other common illnesses, from a simple virus like the flu or mono to chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, or even other autoimmune conditions. So initial identification is exceptionally tricky because there's no unique Lyme fingerprint that immediately sets it apart in those early crucial stages.
And the rash isn't always there.
Precisely. The classic bullseye rash, erythema migrans, isn't always present. Estimates vary, but maybe only 70–80% of people get it. And even when it does appear, it might be in a place you don't easily see, like your scalp or behind your knee, or maybe it doesn't look like a classic bullseye, just a spreading red patch. So it gets missed.
So if you don't get that classic rash, which is what many people think of as the sign of Lyme,
Right, it's the iconic image.
it becomes incredibly easy for both patients and maybe even doctors to dismiss those vague early symptoms as something else entirely, a summer flu, stress, just being tired.
Absolutely. And this delay in even suspecting Lyme, and therefore not testing for it or treating it early, cascades into a delay in initiating adjunctive treatment. That can have really significant lasting repercussions. And compounding these symptom challenges are the limitations of the current diagnostic tests themselves.
The tests aren't perfect either.
No, not by a long shot, especially early on. The standard approach is a two-tiered testing protocol, usually an initial screening test called an ELISA, followed by a more specific confirmatory test, a Western blot, but only if the first test is positive or unclear.
Okay.
The critical issue here is that these tests look for antibodies that your body produces in response to the Borrelia bacterium. They don't directly detect the bacteria itself, usually.
And antibodies take time to develop.
Exactly. That's the crux of the problem. It can take several weeks, sometimes even a month or more, for your immune system to produce enough antibodies to reach detectable levels after the initial infection.
So if you get tested too soon?
If you get tested too early, say within the first few weeks after the tick bite, the test might very well come back negative even if you were actually infected.
Wow. A false negative.
A false negative, yes. And that can provide a really misleading sense of security, leading to further delays in getting the right diagnosis and treatment. This delay, tragically, can allow the infection to progress, to disseminate deeper into various tissues and organs, joints, the nervous system, the heart, making it much harder to treat effectively with standard antibiotic courses later on, and significantly increasing the likelihood of developing those more severe, persistent chronic symptoms. It's a huge hurdle. Hashtag tag BFOI.
The medical debate over chronic Lyme.
And this inherent diagnostic difficulty, the testing issues, it leads us directly to another really complex and often, frankly, emotionally charged area highlighted in our sources. The intense medical debate over what's often called chronic Lyme, and crucially how to treat it. This seems to be a particularly contentious and divisive topic within the medical community, right? Oh, absolutely. It truly raises important questions about the intersection of medical consensus, evidence-based practice, and the undeniable reality of patient experience. It's a tough area. While acute Lyme disease diagnosed early, treated promptly with standard antibiotics, is generally well understood and typically resolves without lasting issues for most people.
Okay.
There is significant ongoing debate regarding persistent symptoms that continue after that standard antibiotic treatment is completed.
Symptoms like the fatigue, pain, brain fog you mentioned earlier?
Exactly. That constellation of often debilitating symptoms, profound chronic fatigue, widespread pain, cognitive impairment, brain fog, various neurological issues that this is often referred to by patients and some practitioners as chronic Lyme disease. Mainstream medical organizations, however, like the CDC or the Infectious Diseases Society of America, ITSA, tend to use the term post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome, or PTLDS.
Why the different terminology? Does it matter?
It matters a lot, actually, because the terminology reflects fundamentally different understandings of what's causing the ongoing symptoms. Chronic Lyme often implies a persistent, active infection. PTLDS implies symptoms remaining after the infection is believed to be cleared.
Okay, so what's the core of this debate then? Where does the fundamental disagreement lie that leads to such different approaches?
The disagreement largely centers on the exact cause of these ongoing symptoms after initial treatment. One side of the debate, often championed by patients who feel dismissed or inadequately treated, and by some doctors often called Lyme-literate physicians, suggests that these persistent symptoms represent an ongoing active infection with the Borrelia bacteria. They theorize that the bacteria might evade or survive the initial standard antibiotic course.
How?
Maybe by hiding in tissues where antibiotics don't penetrate well, or forming protective structures called biofilms, or entering dormant states. They argue that this persistent infection requires more aggressive or long-term antibiotic courses, sometimes for months or even years, to fully eradicate it.
Okay, so they believe the initial treatment wasn't enough.
Essentially, yes. Now, the other side, representing the consensus view of most major medical bodies,
Right.
argues that after a standard adequate course of antibiotics, typically 2 to 4 weeks, the Borrelia bacteria are effectively cleared from the body. They contend that the lingering symptoms seen in PTLDS are not due to persistent active infection.
So what causes the symptoms then, in their view?
They propose several possibilities. It could be residual tissue damage from the initial infection that takes time to heal, or perhaps an autoimmune response triggered by the initial infection where the body mistakenly attacks its own tissues, or maybe even lasting changes in the nervous system signaling.
So post-infectious phenomena, not ongoing infection.
Exactly. And therefore, they argue continued or long-term antibiotics are not only ineffective for PTLDS because there's no active infection to treat, but potentially harmful.
Harmful how?
Risks like promoting antibiotic resistance, seriously disrupting the gut microbiome, and causing side effects from the drugs themselves.
Wow. So completely different understandings of the cause lead to completely different treatment recommendations.
Precisely. And this fundamental difference leaves patients in an incredibly difficult position. They're often caught in the middle, desperately seeking answers and relief for very real and debilitating symptoms, while the medical community is still working to fully understand and agree on the best path forward for this complex, lingering aftermath of infection. It's a major challenge.
This really brings us to a fascinating and rapidly evolving aspect of the whole Lyme story, how it's being discussed and experienced online, especially in spaces like Lyme TikTok, or LymeTok as it's sometimes called. This digital sphere seems to have become a really significant, maybe sometimes chaotic, forum for people grappling with the disease. What's actually happening there?
It's incredibly fascinating, actually. What we're seeing is the sheer power of social media platforms like TikTok becoming these central hubs for deeply personal recovery journeys. Faced with the diagnostic difficulties, the persistent, often invisible symptoms we've been talking about, and the very real medical debates. Many people turn to these platforms for connection and, maybe just as importantly, validation.
Finding others who get it.
Exactly. Individuals are sharing incredibly raw, unfiltered, deeply personal experiences. You see videos detailing the often baffling onset of symptoms, the frustrating journey of seeking a diagnosis, sometimes spanning years and countless doctors, the profound relief of finally getting an answer, and then the challenging, sometimes unconventional paths to treatment and recovery. It has rapidly become this powerful global community for validation and shared experience, where people feel genuinely less alone in their struggles. They find others who articulate the exact sensation of that brain fog, or the weird migratory joint pain, or the distressing experience of being dismissed by doctors. In many ways, it fills a critical void that the traditional healthcare system sometimes struggles to address adequately.
So it's clearly a vital space for community, for feeling less isolated, finding that shared understanding. But our sources also highlight that it's a space, well, teeming with controversy, especially around treatment advice. Given the lack of clear medical consensus on chronic Lyme we just explored, I can imagine how quickly this space could get complicated, maybe even dangerous.
Yes, it absolutely is. That's the double-edged sword. The platform, while offering immense support and validation, also features intense, often polarized debates over various treatment approaches. You'll see discussions covering everything from mainstream antibiotic treatments to a vast array of herbal remedies, supplements, specific diets, alternative therapies, even experimental protocols.
Wow, the whole spectrum.
Pretty much. And given the medical complexities we've detailed about PTLDS or chronic Lyme, and the varying opinions on its nature, it's perhaps not surprising that individuals who feel failed or unheard by conventional medicine are actively seeking alternative solutions or advice online.
Makes sense.
But this also means navigating a vast landscape of unverified information, purely anecdotal evidence, and sometimes well-meaning but ultimately unproven or even harmful advice, right alongside genuine support and potentially credible information. It vividly underscores the public's profound thirst for answers and relief when traditional medicine feels insufficient, slow, or tragically even dismissive.
Right.
The fundamental challenge, of course, for anyone navigating that space is discerning credible, evidence-based information from potentially misleading or unsafe advice within such a dynamic and largely unregulated forum. It requires a lot of critical thinking. #B. Invisible illness conversations and medical gaslighting.
And this digital discourse, especially on places like LymeTok, it clearly ties into broader, really important themes that our sources bring up. Conversations around invisible illness and the painful phenomenon of medical gaslighting. These are powerful terms. What do they mean specifically in the context of Lyme disease?
Yeah, they're crucial concepts for understanding the patient experience. If we connect this to the broader societal understanding of health, invisible illness refers to conditions where the debilitating symptoms are not outwardly visible to others.
Like you look fine on the outside.
Exactly. Unlike a broken leg in a cast or a visible rash, conditions involving profound chronic fatigue, pervasive brain fog, widespread pain, which are often hallmarks of persistent Lyme symptoms, they don't manifest in a way that others can immediately see or understand. This often leads to a profound lack of understanding, empathy, or even belief from friends, family, employers, and disturbingly, sometimes even from medical professionals.
Hmm.
Patients might look outwardly fine, but internally they're battling truly debilitating symptoms. This can lead to deep isolation, frustration, and the added burden of having their suffering dismissed or minimized simply because it's not apparent to the eye.
And Lyme, particularly in its chronic or PTLDS forms, fits this description perfectly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Its most severe and persistent symptoms are often deeply internal and unseen.
And then the term medical gaslighting, which sounds pretty insidious. How does that play out for Lyme patients, given everything we've discussed about the diagnosis challenges and the medical debates?
It's a particularly painful and unfortunately common experience reported by many patients navigating chronic, complex, and poorly understood conditions like persistent Lyme symptoms. Medical gaslighting occurs when a patient's genuine symptoms are dismissed, minimized, questioned, or crucially attributed to psychological factors like saying it's just anxiety or depression or stress by healthcare providers.
Basically telling them it's all in their head.
Essentially, yes. Patients are made to feel as though their symptoms aren't real, that they are exaggerating or being overly dramatic. It effectively leads the patient to doubt their own experience, their own perception of their body, their reality, even their sanity sometimes.
That's awful.
It is. And given the diagnostic difficulties we detailed with Lyme, the often nonspecific nature of the symptoms, and the very contentious medical debate surrounding chronic Lyme PTLDS, many individuals report feeling profoundly disbelieved, invalidated, or explicitly told their physical symptoms are psychosomatic.
Wow.
This raises an exceptionally important question about how the healthcare system as a whole needs to improve. How could it better acknowledge, validate, and compassionately address patient experiences, even when the underlying pathology isn't fully understood by current science, or when our diagnostic tools fall short?
Right.
It's a critical area for improving patient-provider relationships, fostering genuine trust, and ensuring that patients feel truly heard, respected, and believed, rather than dismissed or undermined.
It really highlights the profound human and emotional cost of living with a complex disease where clear answers are hard to come by and where the patient's deeply personal lived experience can be so tragically invalidated. These online communities then, while sometimes controversial in the advice shared, clearly serve a vital, maybe even life-saving role for people to find a space where their struggles are recognized, understood, and validated.
For many, yes. They provide a lifeline of community and belief that can be incredibly important when facing such challenges. Hashtag Zigo. The bigger picture and moving forward. Hashtag day. Public health infrastructure.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit from the individual patient experience. Our sources also touch on broader, systemic themes, like the critical role of public health infrastructure in tackling a rapidly rising challenge like Lyme disease. What specific challenges and maybe opportunities does Lyme present for our public health systems globally? How are they responding, or how should they be?
That's a fundamental question. The rise of Lyme disease really puts a spotlight on the adaptability and resilience of our public health systems, especially facing infectious diseases clearly being influenced by environmental factors like climate change. The increasing incidence of Lyme places immense pressure on existing functions. Our surveillance systems that track disease spread, the diagnostic labs that confirm cases, and crucially, the frontline healthcare providers, GPs, ER docs, who are often the first point of contact.
Right, the whole chain is stressed.
Exactly. It vividly highlights the urgent need for robust, dynamic infrastructure. We need systems that can not only track disease spread accurately and maybe closer to real time, but also ensure timely and accurate diagnosis at the point of care, which we know is a huge issue. And then effectively disseminate evidence-based prevention strategies to the public so people know how to protect themselves.
Are these things happening?
Our sources indicate that public health efforts from major organizations like the CDC in the US and the WHO globally are definitely underway and ramping up. This includes heightened awareness campaigns, trying to expand surveillance, particularly in newly affected areas, and a significant, much-needed push for better, more reliable diagnostic tests to overcome the current challenges and reduce misdiagnosis.
So it's really about being prepared, isn't it? Not just reacting, but proactively understanding where the disease is, how it's moving, how its geographic footprint is changing.
Forecasting potential hotspots.
And crucially, ensuring that people have the tools, both information and accessible medical resources, to identify it early and get treated quickly.
It's a continuous evolving effort. It demands significant investment, collaboration between different agencies, and a high degree of adaptability as the environment keeps shifting. Hashtag B, outdoor risk awareness. And another critical theme, directly linked to that public health effort, is the escalating importance of just basic outdoor risk awareness among the general public. Given the increasing tick populations we've discussed and their significantly extended active season,
Longer tick season, right?
there's a heightened continuous need for people to not just know about Lyme disease, but to truly understand and adopt effective, everyday prevention strategies. Simple, consistent measures become even more crucial. They shift from being casual recommendations to really vital personal health practices.
Like what specifically? What are the key things people should be doing?
We're talking about basic yet impactful practices. Wearing protective clothing when you're in wooded, bushy, or grassy areas. Think long-sleeve shirts, long pants tucked into socks or boots. Sounds simple, but it creates a physical barrier.
Consistently using EPA-approved tick repellents on exposed skin, and maybe treating clothes with permethrin for longer-lasting protection, and performing diligent, thorough tick checks on yourself, your kids, and your pets after any time spent outdoors where ticks might be present, no matter how brief, even your own backyard.
Checking everywhere, right? Not just legs.
Everywhere, including those often missed hidden spots, the scalp, behind the ears, in the hair, in skin folds like armpits or groin, around the waistline, behind the knees. Ticks like warm, hidden places.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, whether you love hiking, gardening, camping, or just spending time with your family in the local park? It means your relationship with the outdoors perhaps needs to subtly evolve. It means being significantly more vigilant and proactive about prevention. Understanding that the risks might have fundamentally shifted in your local environment, even if you never thought of your area as a tick zone before. It's about personal responsibility and proactive behavior working hand in hand with those broader public health efforts to mitigate a growing risk. It's empowering people with knowledge and tools. #C. Shifting disease maps. And if we connect this back to the overarching narrative of global health and environmental change, Lyme disease serves as a prime, vivid, and highly tangible example of what we call a shifting disease map.
Shifting disease map. What does that mean exactly?
It means climate change isn't just causing diseases to intensify where they already exist or to occur more frequently. It is literally redrawing the geographical boundaries where certain diseases and their vectors like ticks or mosquitoes can survive and thrive.
So places that were safe before might not be now.
Precisely. Areas that were previously unsuitable for deer ticks, for example, because of consistently cold winters or unfavorable humidity, are now becoming viable, even ideal habitats due to warming trends. This profound phenomenon requires everyone, public health officials, doctors, environmental scientists, and indeed every individual, to fundamentally reevaluate what they consider safe or at-risk areas.
For Lyme, but potentially for other diseases too.
Absolutely, for Lyme disease, but potentially for a whole host of other vector-borne illnesses that are also sensitive to climate patterns.
Right.
Things like West Nile virus, dengue fever, Zika. The list goes on. The traditional static maps of where diseases are prevalent are rapidly becoming obsolete. We urgently need to understand and adapt to this new, dynamic, shifting terrain of disease risk.
It's a powerful and, frankly, stark illustration of just how profoundly interconnected environmental health and human health truly are. It's not abstract anymore. It impacts everyday decisions, where we choose to live, where we recreate, how we build our communities, and fundamentally how we protect ourselves and our families.
It's a vivid, immediate reminder that these large-scale environmental changes have direct, measurable, and often escalating consequences for our personal well-being and the very infrastructure of public health we rely on. But it's not all doom and gloom. This leads us to a crucial and hopefully more optimistic area of discussion regarding future prevention and intervention strategies. Our sources do mention some genuinely promising developments on the horizon.
Like what? What's coming down the pipeline?
Well, a vaccine against Lyme disease is currently in advanced stages of development and clinical trials. This isn't the first attempt at a Lyme vaccine. There was one before that was pulled from the market, but this new candidate uses different technology and looks promising.
A vaccine could be huge.
It could truly be a transformative tool. If successful and widely adopted, it could significantly reduce infection rates, offering a crucial layer of protection that currently isn't broadly available to the public. It would be a game changer for prevention.
Okay, that's hopeful. What else?
Alongside the vaccine development, there's a strong, concerted, and absolutely necessary push for better, faster, and far more accurate diagnostic tests.
Addressing those early detection problems we talked about.
Exactly. Improved diagnostics, maybe tests that can detect the bacteria directly early on, or tests that are more sensitive to early antibody responses would dramatically reduce the frustrating and damaging problem of misdiagnosis and late diagnosis. It would allow for earlier, more targeted, and therefore more effective treatment. And potentially, this could mitigate the progression to those chronic, persistent symptoms.
And maybe even alleviate some of the heated medical debates around PTLDS if we could diagnose and treat more effectively up front.
That's certainly the hope. Better tools could lead to better outcomes and perhaps clearer understanding.
It definitely seems like there's a clear and urgent recognition within the scientific and medical communities that we desperately need more and better tools in our toolbox to effectively combat this growing health challenge, both on the prevention side with potential vaccine and on the treatment and management side with improved diagnostics.
The collective hope is that these advancements will fundamentally transform the landscape of Lyme disease management and significantly reduce its societal burden in the coming years. We have to remain optimistic about innovation. #outro.
So, what does this all mean for you? As we've unpacked this deep dive, it's abundantly clear that Lyme disease is far more than just a passing health trend or a simple seasonal nuisance. It's a complex and deeply interconnected interplay of accelerating environmental shifts driven by climate change, powerful public awareness campaigns fueled by personal stories and online communities, significant and persistent medical challenges in diagnosis and treatment, and that burgeoning digital discourse around chronic, often invisible, illness. It profoundly underscores the critical importance of staying informed, of understanding our rapidly changing environment, and perhaps more than ever, of becoming an active, informed advocate for ourselves and our loved ones within the healthcare system.
Self-advocacy becomes key.
Here's a final thought for you to mull over as we conclude today's deep dive. How might the continued rise of diseases like Lyme, undeniably linked to large-scale climate change, compel us to fundamentally rethink our entire relationship with the natural world? Might it force a radical reimagination of the public health infrastructure we build to protect human well-being? Are we really entering a new era of climate-driven health challenges that demand a deeper, more systemic shift in how we live, how our societies are organized, and ultimately how we interact with our planet? Something to think about. Next time on Trending Unpacked, is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting really being shut down? We break down what's happening, what it means for PBS and NPR, and why it's causing such a stir.